Hey there, do you know what black gold billionaires are? In this video, we will tell you the truth about black gold. The countries that produce the most oil in the world are black gold billionaires. Among the largest oil-producing countries are Saudi Arabia, America, Russia, and other countries. Let's jump to the video for further discussion. Saudi Arabia has more black gold than any country, producing more than 11.7 million barrels per day in 2012. And is the world's largest oil producer. The country's crude oil production at 9.83 million barrels per day during the year. Saudi Arabia has the world's second largest proven oil reserves, estimated at 267.9 billion barrels as of 2013, more than half of which are in just 8 of the country's nearly 100 major oil and gas fields. Available: the offshore Ghawar field, with remaining oil reserves of 70 billion barrels and a production capacity of 5 million barrels per day, is the world's largest oil field in terms of both reserves and production. The country also hosts Safaniya, the world's largest offshore oil field, with 36 billion barrels of recoverable oil reserves and 1.5 million barrels per day of production capacity. Kuwait, Munifa, and Qatar are the other major oil-producing fields in Saudi Arabia. In addition to crude oil, the country produced 1.8 million barrels per day of natural gas liquids in 2012. Saudi Arabia's net oil exports averaged 8.8 million barrels per day during the year, making it the world's largest oil exporter. The country consumed 2.86 million barrels per day of oil and had a refinery capacity of 2.12 million barrels per day, the 6th largest in the world. The United States produced more than 11.1 million barrels per day of oil in 2012, becoming the world's second largest oil producer. The country is expected to overtake Saudi Arabia in total oil production shortly by increasing production from its shale reserves. In 2012, U.S. crude oil production was 8.48 million barrels per day, the third largest behind Saudi Arabia and Russia. The U.S. had 26.54 billion barrels of proven oil reserves as of 2013. The Permian Basin, the Eagle Ford in Texas, and the Bakken in North Dakota account for most of America's oil reserves. After North Dakota and Texas, California, Colorado, and Louisiana are the fastest oil-producing states in the U.S. The BP-operated Prudhoe Bay Field in Alaska, the Superberry Field in West Texas, and the Thunder Horse and Mars Ursa offshore fields in the Mississippi Valley in the Gulf of Mexico are among the largest oil-producing fields in the United States. The United States consumed 18.5 million barrels per day of oil in 2012, making it the world's largest oil consumer. It was the world's largest oil importer before China narrowly overtook it in the fourth quarter of 2013 in the volume of oil imports. The U.S. is also the world's largest oil refiner, with a refinery capacity of 17.38 million barrels per day in 2013, up from about 18.8% of total world refinery capacity. Russia, with a 2012 production of 10.39 million barrels per day of oil from 320 active rigs, is the world's third largest oil producer. The country's crude oil production averaged 9.92 million barrels per day during the year, the second largest after the U.S. Russia's estimated oil reserves of 80 billion barrels at the beginning of 2013 are considered the 8th largest in the world. The West Siberian region, with large oil fields such as North Pryubskoye, Smutlar, Mamontovskoye, and Selmskoye, accounts for about 60% of Russia's total oil production. The Urals Volga, where the giant Romashkinskoye oil field is located, is Russia's second largest oil-producing region. Eastern Siberia, the North Caucasus, the Timon-Pekora, the Barents Seas, and the Sakhalin Islands off the coast of eastern Russia are other major oil-producing areas. With an oil consumption of 3.2 million barrels per day in 2012, Russia is the 5th largest oil consumer. Oil exports from Russia reached 7.2 million barrels per day during the year, making it the second largest oil exporter after Saudi Arabia. Russia has the third largest refinery capacity in the world. The United Arab Emirates, which produced 3.2 million barrels per day of oil in 2012, was the world's seventh largest oil producer. The country's crude oil production during the year was 2.8 million barrels per day, the eighth largest in the world. The UAE is also the third largest oil producer in the Middle East. The country has the world's seventh largest proven oil reserves, estimated at 97.8 billion barrels as of 2013. Located off the coast of Abu Dhabi, the Zakum oil field is the largest in the UAE. The Zakum Development Company operates the Upper Zakum oil field, with recoverable reserves of 21 billion barrels, and is the second largest offshore oil field in the world. Other major offshore fields in the country are Lower Zakum, Gashabatini, Nasser, and Sheef. The UAE consumed about 618,000 barrels of oil per day in 2012 and exported 2.59 million barrels per day a year, becoming the world's third largest net oil exporter after Saudi Arabia and Russia. The country's refinery capacity during 2012 was 773,000 barrels per day. Iraq is the eighth largest oil producer in the world and the fourth largest in the Middle East. Iraq had oil production of 2.98 million barrels per day in 2012. Iraq's proven oil reserves were estimated at 140 billion barrels in 2013, making it the fifth largest in the world and the third largest in the Middle East. The country's oil reserves are mostly concentrated in southern Iraq and Kurdish areas in northern Iraq. Major oil-producing areas in Iraq are Kirkuk, Rumeila, West Kurna, Manjun, Iz-Zubar, Halfaya, Garif, and Badra. The country used about 751,000 barrels of oil per day in 2012 and exported 2.23 million barrels per day of oil during the year, making it the world's sixth largest net oil exporter after Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates and Kuwait, and the fourth largest in the Middle East. Become an exporter. Iraq's refinery capacity during the year was 638,000 barrels per day. Kuwait stood as the world's 10th largest oil producer, with 2.79 million barrels per day of total oil production in 2012. After Saudi Arabia, Iran, United Arab Emirates, and Iraq, Kuwait is the fifth largest oil producer in the Middle East. Kuwait has the world's sixth proven oil reserves, estimated at 104 billion barrels. The Greater Bergen oil field, consisting of the Bergen, Magwa, and Ahmadi reservoirs in southeastern Kuwait, is the largest in the country in terms of both reserves and production. Other major oil-producing fields in the country include the Rudin and Sabriya, Al Raqqa oil fields in northern Kuwait, and the Godar, Menagash, and Abdallah oil fields in southern Kuwait. The country consumed 383,000 barrels of oil per day and exported 2.4 million barrels per day. Kuwait is the world's fourth largest net oil exporter after Saudi Arabia, Russia, and the United Arab Emirates. In 2012, the country's refinery capacity was 936,000 barrels per day. That's all for today. If you liked the video, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more informative videos. Leave a comment down below about what was the interesting part of the video. I'll see you at another one. Goodbye. Take care.